Well, good morning, security gang. September 3rd, 2025. I feel like after Labor Day, just everything really picks up really, really fast. And if we don't keep up with it, we often find ourselves in that really, really dark and bad place. And what I mean by dark and bad place is trying to catch up with how fast things are moving. So, this Salesloft Drift supply chain attack is just not going away anytime soon. So, don't want to bore you with it, but I've brewed my espresso. It's ready to go, Jay. I promise you. Here it comes with a full explanation on Fo. Um, the what's happening now with the Salesloft Drift supply chain attack is going to be on the news for quite some time. Just get ready for it. I said it now. Here we go. My double espresso this morning. See that foam? That's how you know it's good espresso. Like, I've always explained the foam on the show, and people always like stop me. Like the other day, I was at an event, and someone goes like, "What's up with the foam?" And I said, "Look, good espresso comes out, and in Italy, that foam is richer, and then they have the espresso macchiato, which is kind of like a little bit of foam on top of it, which is what some places will do anyways in order to make you think like they're giving you a good espresso when they're not. Smell it. If the espresso doesn't smell bitter, then they actually cleaned their machine and they used the right beans and they didn't burn their beans. If you smell an espresso and it smells bitter, just throw on a bunch of sugar. You don't want to insult the coffee person who made it, because you will. Coffee cup cheers, y'all. You were tuning into a cybersecurity morning news show, but you didn't know you were also getting a coffee lesson. It just all comes in with the job. All right. How many people use Salesloft Drift? I mean, really, how many? Apparently over 700. Cloudflare is the latest cybersecurity company, joining Palo Alto, Zscaler, and many others that still have not disclosed yet, being impacted by the Salesloft Drift breach, part of the supply chain attack on Salesforce. Cloudflare was notified of the breach on August 23rd. It alerted impacted customers of the incident on September 2nd. Before informing customers of the attack, it also rotated all 104 Cloudflare platform issued tokens exfiltrated during the breach, even though it has yet to discover any suspicious activity linked to those tokens. Most of the information is customer contact information and basic case data, but some customer support interactions may reveal information about a customer's configuration and could even contain sensitive information like access tokens. All of the exfiltrated case objects contain only text-based data, including the subject line of the Salesforce case, the body of the case, which may include keys, secrets, if provided by the customer to Cloudflare, and customer contact information like name, request or email address, phone number, company domain, and company country. We believe this incident was not an isolated event, but the threat actor intended to harvest these credentials and customer information for future attacks. And again, she joins Google, so many others. We talked about it yesterday on the show, but the supply chain attack, different from Snowflake and many others. And here's how it's different from 2024 Snowflake. And I was working on the Saturday article yesterday. Like, I give those comparisons there, so you'll wait a little bit to see that. But with Snowflake, they primarily went after data. Here, they're using Salesforce as another method to launch more and more attacks. So just keep that in mind, folks. That's really, really important. A few weeks ago, we talked about the Pennsylvania Attorney General confirming an outage at the office of the Pennsylvania Attorney General. Let me start off with that. Well, now they're confirming it was a ransomware attack behind a 3-week-long outage, impacting operations at all offices across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The incident, disclosed on August 11th through a social media post, said the office's entire network was down, including its website, email, and main phone line. By August 14th, access to the website was restored in some capacity. On the 18th, Attorney General Dave Sunday announced that employees were gradually being provided with access to their email accounts. Phone lines remained down for another week. The office's division and respective sections have been operating through the outage, albeit using alternate channels and methods. On the 29th of last month, Attorney General Sunday confirmed that file encrypting ransomware was used in the attack, but then provide information as to what group was there. It took them 3 weeks to get back online, folks. 3 weeks. And what does that tell us? It tells us something very, very simple. Resiliency is not some magic word. Resiliency is everything for cybersecurity practitioners because we need to bat a perfect 100. If you're a baseball fan like yours truly, you know that even the best batters batted around 320, 330. That's like a great batting average. Those are greats, Hall of Famers. Most people average around the 200s, meaning 80% of the time they miss. And in cyber, we have to bat at 1,000. And if we bat at 0.99999, guess what? We're SOL. And so the resiliency for that when that event does happen is critical. And what we see with the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office is resiliency just wasn't the case there. It took them 3 weeks to restore operations and get back and even admit it was ransomware. Now, they knew this was ransomware day one. They could have said it was ransomware day one. But it just shows you the resiliency was not in play for the Pennsylvania Attorney General. But also British automobile manufacturer Jaguar Land Rover scrambling to restore operations and applications that were impacted by a cyber attack. The brief notice on Tuesday, the company said it disconnected its system, which severely impacted both retail and manufacturing operation. So for those who don't know, manufacturing, and I've said this a bunch of times on the show, is the exception of the OT-IT rule. So when you speak to energy and oil and gas folks, and a lot of them, they'll tell you OT is on a separate network, IT is on a separate network. Most ransomware happens on the IT. We rarely see OT ransomware, right? Leverages the IT networks. Some IT networks command OT networks, but they're air-gapped, meaning you've got to be on-site, on-prem, on that machine in order to operate the OT equipment. Hence, Stuxnet, what was used to essentially blow up centrifuges in the Iran nuclear facility 14 years ago, 12 years ago, 14 years ago, whenever that was, which was a bunch of thumb drives or someone internally that plugged in and dropped the payload, and then it took over those machines. Otherwise, they would have never been able to hack them. So just so we're clear. In manufacturing, though, that's the exception. And the reason for it is because as the manufacturing processes commences, there's IT operational stuff within the various OT equipment. And specifically when it's not distributed, when you don't have multi-segmentation and you're doing network segmentation and micro segmentation of your networks, when you're not really building a resilient kind of what I like to call islands is how I design it in manufacturing, kind of like these little OT, IT islands that are micro segmented, kind of have their own little set of controls and so forth. When you don't do that, this is exactly what happens. So ransomware gets into your IT system, typically impacts your ERP or inventory system or one of your supply chains within the manufacturing process. And then when they're not separated, when your networks aren't micro segmented, when you can't really say, did it jump from this place to the other because you don't know, you have to shut everything down. That's exactly what's happening at Jaguar and Land Rover. So now they're working at pace to restart their global applications in a controlled manner. And the way they do that, for those who don't know, is if you're going through a cyber incident, and Eduardo, what's up, man? Thank you for being here. So if you're going through an incident and you're wanting to restart operations as part of your resiliency, you're starting parts of your operation, you're restoring and you're measuring. So you've got all eyes are on it, right? So your recovery team has all eyes on what you're bringing back up. You're looking for any sort of anything out of the ordinary, anything outside of baseline. Are any signatures or any behaviors of that malware family still there? You look for all of that because that's really how you do that restoration effectively, and that takes time. Like in the Pennsylvania Attorney General case, they likely didn't have resilience practice. They had to do it each by each separation, no microsegmentation, meaning they had to rebuild their networks from zero. When you microsegment your networks and you manage them effectively, it makes it much, much easier to restore them during resilience because you can leave some networks online because they were never really impacted by it. So the operational disruption is also suggesting that file encryption malware may have been involved, but there's no group claiming that as of yet. On Monday, filing with the BCE India, formerly Bombay Stock Exchange, DLR parent company Tata Motors said the security incident had global impact. They're working at pace to resolve global IT issues impacting their business. They'll provide an update as appropriate in due course. So as more information becomes available, we'll keep everyone here appraised to what's happening there. We move to a cyber attack attempt in Brazil on a massive fintech firm, a Brazilian called Evertech, which is the Brazilian subsidiary of Sinqia, after getting unauthorized access to its environment on the central bank's real-time payment system, trying to steal $130 million from the system. Evertech is a public financial fintech company that has full major service transaction processors in Latin America, Puerto Rico, and the Caribbeans. Sinqia was acquired by Evertech in 2023, and that's a Sao Paulo-based public company operating in financial services and IT services for the banking and financial industry. The disclosed filing to the SEC said that attackers breached their system on August 29th and attempted to conduct unauthorized transactions. They were able to put a stop to it and began working on the forensics of how they got in. Pix is Brazil's instant payment system launched by the Central Bank of Brazil in November of 2020, gives people access to their funds 24/7 and transfers. It's become widely used. Think of like Venmo or Cash App, right? The attackers attempted to perform unauthorized business-to-business transactions involving two financial institutions that are customers of Sinqia. Local media outlets implicated HSBC, while a spokesperson for the bank underlined that this incident had not impacted customer funds or data, meaning they were impacted, but it didn't impact that. They didn't want people rushing to the bank. So that's another one. Hello from Germany. Guten Tag. Thank you for tuning in, Guarn. All right. We'll continue with Disney agreeing with the FTC on a $10 million settlement in violation of the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act after improperly labeling some YouTube videos as not made for kids, but enabling data collection for children under 13 without parental consent. According to the FTC, several YouTube videos featuring beloved franchises like Frozen, Toy Story, and The Incredibles were mislabeled due to Disney's reliance on channel-level default settings instead of individually designing each video's audience category. The oversight meant that the child-directed content was often marked incorrectly, allowing personal data collection and targeted advertising in violation of federal law. So laziness cost you $10 million. Not a lot of money for him, right? But nonetheless, it just kind of shows you the idea of how this comes through, and how the FTC's going about this and settling it. Again, it's a slap on the wrist. It's a small slap. Disney makes billions and billions of dollars. So what's 10 million? But in the grand scheme of thing, if they had someone actually managing the channel effectively when they upload this stuff, you think about it, that's a $500,000 a year budget. So to pay $10 million to save $500,000 a year, like if they hired 5 people and paid them $100,000 a year to do this, it would have saved them the fine. Just sometimes this is a great lesson in don't cut corners on compliance, because when big government comes, irregardless to who's on top of the government, you're going to get fined. And while they're going to write this off as being like, all right, won't happen again, it's definitely going to be there. We go back to Cloudflare saying on Monday that they blocked the largest DDoS attack ever recorded at 11.5 terabits per second. The short message on X, Cloudflare only shared that the attack was a UDP flood, mainly sourced from Google Cloud infrastructure, and lasted around 35 seconds. The defenses have been working overtime. They've autonomously blocked hundreds of hyper volumetric DDoS attacks, with the largest reaching peaks of 5.1 BBS and 11.5 Tbps. So in Tuesday, Cloudflare said the Google Cloud was one source of the attack, but not the majority, and that several IoT and cloud providers were used to launch that type of assault. And that seems indicative of that type of stuff. And UDP packets, by the way, they're really easy to manipulate. They're very, very low volume. So they're not a heavy lift. And they're also accepted everywhere. So it's really, really hard to block those types of attacks. So good job to Cloudflare. Sangoma is releasing emergency patches for their zero-day vulnerability exploited to hack the FreePBX servers with the admin control panel accessible from the internet. We talked about this last week. We didn't give it a lot of attention, but now this is really gaining a lot of attention in the market. CVE 2025-57819 has a perfect score of 10. The bug is described as an insufficient sanitization of user-supplied data. The successful exploitation of the flaw would allow attackers to access the PBX admin panel, enabling database manipulation and remote code execution. Fixes were rolled out for FreePBX versions 15, 16, and 17 after they discovered that the security defect has been exploited in the wild starting on or before August 21st. The attackers' servers had inadequate IP filtering and ASLs, as noticed in one of the GitHub advisories. So you want to make sure you get this patched up. Nick Anderson has now taken over as the executive assistant and director for cybersecurity at CISA. Anderson, who began yesterday, served as principal deputy assistant secretary at the Department of Energy, Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response from 2019 to 2021. During that time, he performed the duties of assistant secretary, according to the press release. Anderson worked closely with Sean Planke, who the senator from Oregon, who keeps screaming and holding up nominations, has not allowed his nomination to still continue. So the gentleman from Oregon should be retired at this point. Karen Evans, who has transitioned to FEMA, filling Anderson's new role from January to March. And most recently, Chris Patera held the position as acting capacity. The recently departed Eric Goldstein held this role for 4 years during President Biden's administration. So Nick joining CISA is a good thing. Yesterday, a rumor floating around the internet. You know how those rumors work on the internet. They're great. They're fantastic. And everyone retweets. But Google has now disputed a widely reported story about the company warning all users to reset their passwords due to a recent data breach that also affected some workspace account. The claim was covered by multiple news outlets, even cybersecurity companies. Only it wasn't true. It wasn't true. Google saying, like, dude, no, everyone's good. We're fine. Like, we're constantly keeping an eye on it. We would, not something we would do. Fake. Hashtag labeled fake. There's that. So don't worry about it. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, live with all the latest and greatest. If you haven't subscribed to CyberHubPodcast.com, you should do so. You know why? Because this podcast, after it's over, gets condensed in written format with a great to-do list, some key, like, one paragraphs of every single story we talked about, and it goes into your inbox directly with the audio version. So you can forward it, share it, do whatever you feel like. If you're finding this useful, you can do just that. So go to cyberhubpodcast.com and subscribe there. We'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, with the latest. Until then, thank you all for tuning in this morning. Have a great rest of your day. And most importantly, y'all, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.